The medical frigate Gentle Dawn drifted through the empty darkness of the Korath. Expanse like a wounded animal. Waiting to die, Captain Sirith stood at the viewport of her damaged bridge and watched the stars spin slowly past as her ship tumbled without power to correct its rotation. She was a Valorian, tall and slender with 4 graceful arms and scales that shifted color with her emotions. Right now, those scales had faded to a dull gray that matched the despair in her heart. 3 days had passed since the Kreth slavers had found them. 3 days since those brutal raiders had torn through their weak defenses and stripped their cargo holds of everything valuable. 3 days since they had been left here to die slowly. In the void between stars, the Gentle Dawn had never been a warship. She was a medical transport, designed to carry the sick and wounded to safety when the border conflicts had erupted in the outer colonies. Sirith had volunteered her vessel to evacuate refugees. 37 souls now huddled in the dim emergency lighting of her dying ship. 12 of them were critical patients who needed real medical facilities to survive. None of them would get that chance now. Sirith turned away from the viewport and walked through the damaged corridors of her vessel. Emergency lights cast everything in a pale red glow that made the destruction look even worse. Cables hung from torn ceiling panels. Walls were scarred with weapon burns, where the Kreth boarding parties had fought their way through. The air recyclers wheezed and struggled to keep the atmosphere breathable in the main cargo bay. The refugees had gathered together for warmth as the heating systems slowly failed. They were families mostly, parents clutching children, elders sitting quietly with acceptance in their eyes. A young female named Thesa, barely through her first molt and still showing the bright scales of youth, looked up as the captain entered. "Is there any news?" she asked. And hope flickered briefly in her golden eyes. Sirith could not bring herself to lie. "The distress beacon is still transmitting," she said gently. "But we have received no response yet." She did not tell them that she had already contacted everyone she could think of. She did not tell them that Valorian Command had said they were too far away to help. She did not tell them that the Galactic Accord Emergency Services had explained that the Korath expanse was outside their jurisdiction. She did not tell them that 3 different trading posts had expressed sympathy but refused to send ships into lawless space. There was no point in destroying their hope. Completely let them hold onto it a little longer. In the engine room, old Melox was performing miracles with broken equipment. He had served on starships for longer than Sirith had been alive, and his amber eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen everything the galaxy could offer. When Sirith entered, he straightened up from his console and wiped lubricant from his weathered hands. "How bad is it?" she asked. Melox let out a long breath, and his scales flickered with reluctant honesty. "I have managed to stabilize life support," he said, "but I cannot work miracles forever." "Captain," he gestured at his displays with one tired hand, "the power cells are draining faster than I can compensate. How long do we have?" The old engineer hesitated, and Sirith knew that meant the answer was worse than she had feared. 18 hours, Melox finally said. "Perhaps 20 if we reduce power consumption to absolute minimum levels. And after that the air recyclers will fail and we'll have perhaps 6 more hours before the atmosphere becomes toxic." Sirith closed her eyes and felt the weight of 37 lives pressing down on her shoulders. She had known when she volunteered for this mission that there would be risks. She had accepted that she might face danger in the border regions, but she had never imagined dying like this, slowly and helplessly in the empty dark with no one coming to save them. "Thank you, Melox," she said quietly. "Keep doing what you can." She returned to the bridge where her small crew had gathered. There was Keleth, Her first officer, young and eager, but with a good heart, there was Voss, her communications specialist, who had not stopped trying to reach someone for 3 days straight. There was Dr. Renna, who had been working without rest to keep the critical patients alive. They all looked at her with expectation, and she realized she had nothing to offer them except the truth. "I have spoken with Melox," she said. "We have perhaps 18 hours of life support remaining." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sekula's scales flushed with emotion, but he controlled himself. Darena simply nodded, as if she had already known. Voss turned back to his console, still searching the frequencies for any sign of help. "There must be someone," he muttered. "Someone has to hear us." But there was no one. The Korath expanse was a lawless stretch of space that no government wanted to claim, and no navy wanted to patrol ships that entered. This region did so at their own risk, and ships that died here were simply forgotten. Sire sat down in her captain's chair and tried to compose herself. She would need to address the refugees soon. She would need to find the words to tell them that their journey was ending here in the cold dark. She was still searching for those words when Voss suddenly sat up straight at his "Station captain," he said, and his voice trembled with something that might have been confusion or might have been hope. "I am receiving a signal." Cirith's heart lurched in her chest. "What kind of signal?" "It is a response to our distress beacon," Voss said. "But the frequency is strange. I do not recognize the carrier wave pattern." "Put it through." Static filled the bridge for a moment, and then a voice cut through the noise. It was a strange voice, speaking in accented galactic common with harsh consonants and an aggressive rhythm that Cirith had never heard before. "Unidentified vessel. This is the U East Defiance. We intercepted your distress call 4 days ago. Hold on. We are coming." The bridge fell silent. Kelth was the first to speak. "Captain, I do not recognize that ship designation. UES is not a Valorian code, not a chord. Not anyone I know." Voss was working frantically at his console. "I am tracing the signal origin," he said. And then his scales went pale with shock. "Captain, this transmission is coming from the Terran frontier." Cirith felt cold spread through her body. "That is impossible," she whispered. "The Terran frontier is 17 days away at standard jump speed." "I know," Voss said. "But they say they received our signal 4 days ago. That means they have been traveling for 4 days. To cover that distance in 4 days, they would need to be moving at speeds that would tear any ship apart." Nobody had an answer for that. Nobody could explain how a ship could cross 17 days of space in 4, but the signal was real, and the voice had been clear. Someone was coming for the first time in 3 days. Captain Cirith allowed herself to feel something other than despair. She did not know who these humans were or how they were doing the impossible, but they had heard her call and they had answered when no one else would, and in that moment, that was enough. The hours that followed the mysterious transmission were filled with anxious waiting. Captain Cirith had shared the news with her crew and passengers, though she was careful not to promise too much. A signal was not the same as a rescue. Words across the void meant nothing until a ship actually arrived. Still, the mood on the Gentle Dawn had shifted from despair to cautious hope. The refugees whispered among themselves about the strange message and the unknown species that had sent it. Few of them had ever heard of humans. Humanity was a young species, barely 60 cycles into their interstellar existence. They kept to their remote frontier, on the edge of explored space, and rarely involved themselves in galactic affairs. The Galactic Accord considered them a minor civilization, primitive in their technology and unremarkable in their accomplishments. What business did such a species have responding to distress calls in the Korath expanse? Cirith did not have answers to these questions, but she found herself checking the sensors every few Minutes regardless 12 hours after the transmission. Melox reported that life support was beginning to fail. 14 hours after the transmission. The temperature in the cargo bay dropped to dangerous levels 16 hours after the transmission. The Arena lost one of her critical patients, despite her best efforts, and then, 18 hours after the transmission, something impossible happened. The sensors screamed with warning alerts as a massive energy signature appeared at the edge of detection range. Voss nearly fell out of his chair as he scrambled to identify the approaching vessel. "Captain," he shouted. "A ship just dropped out of some kind of faster-than-light travel. But I've never seen readings like this before. Can you identify it?" "Working on it," Voss said. And his hands flew across his console. "The energy signature is completely foreign. Their engines are putting out power levels that should not be possible for a ship that size." Kelleth moved to the tactical station and pulled up the visual sensors. When the image appeared on the main display, every Valorian on the bridge went silent. The ship that approached them was unlike anything they had ever seen. Where Valorian vessels were elegant and curved like seabirds in flight, this ship was brutal and angular, where Accord ships were smooth and organic. This vessel was harsh and industrial. It looked like a weapon given form. All sharp edges and armored plates and weapon arrays that bristled. From every surface, scars marked its hull where past battles had left their marks. Someone had painted words on its side, an alien script that the translator could not immediately process. "That is a warship," Kelleth said quietly. "A real warship, not a patrol vessel or a custom ship. That is a ship built for serious combat." "Can you identify the class?" Cirith asked. "Negative. There is nothing like it in our databases." The ship continued its approach, and Cirith noticed that it was decelerating smoothly despite the insane speeds. It must have been traveling. Whatever technology these humans used, it was far more advanced than the Accord had believed. A new transmission crackled through the speakers. "Gentle Dawn. This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the U.S. Defiance. We are on final approach to your position. Please confirm your status and prepare to receive our shuttle." Cirith stepped forward and opened the channel. "Defiance. This is Captain Cirith of the Gentle Dawn. We confirm receipt of your transmission. Our life support is failing, and we have wounded aboard. Any assistance you can provide would be welcome." "Understood. Captain, our shuttle will dock in approximately 15 minutes. We are bringing medical supplies, engineering teams, and emergency power cells. Just hold on a little longer." The channel closed, and Cirith let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. 15 minutes later, the Defiance had taken position alongside the damaged frigate up close. The human warship was even more intimidating than it had appeared on sensors. It dwarfed the Gentle Dawn by a factor of 10. Its armored hull looming over them like a protective giant. A shuttle detached from the larger vessel and crossed the void with impressive speed. The Gentle Dawn's airlock was damaged but still functional, and Cirith gathered her senior staff to meet their rescuers when the airlock cycled open. Captain Cirith came face to face with humans for the first time in her life. There were 5 of them, and they moved into the corridor with a strange efficiency that made her scales prickle with instinctive caution. They were bipedal like many species, but their movements were different somehow. Predatory in a way that spoke of a violent evolutionary history. Their eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings, and their hands stayed close to the weapons at their hips. The leader stepped forward, and Cirith studied her carefully. She was shorter than a Valorian, stocky and muscular, with close-cropped dark hair and a jagged scar that ran across her jaw. Her eyes were dark and intense, and her expression carried a weight of authority that transcended species. "Captain Cirith?" the human asked, and her voice was firm but not unkind. "Yes, I am Cirith." The human extended one hand. Palm open and fingers spread. Cyrith recognized this as a greeting gesture from her. Limited knowledge of human customs, and she reached out with one of her own hands to clasp it. The human's grip was warm and surprisingly strong. "Commander Elena Vasquez," the human said. "Terran Emergency Response Division. We came as fast as we could." "You came faster than should be possible," Cyrith replied. "Our calculations suggested that the Terran frontier was 17 days from here at standard jump speeds." Something that might have been pride flickered across Vasquez's scarred face. "We do not use standard jump speeds, Captain. When someone is dying in the dark, we find ways to go faster." She turned and gestured to her team. "These are my people. Dr. Chun is our chief medical officer. He will help with your wounded. Lieutenant Torres and her engineering team will work on your life support. Sergeant Morrison and his squad will provide security while we work." The humans spread out with practiced coordination and began their tasks without waiting for direction. Dr. Chun, a tall male with gentle hands despite his military bearing, moved toward the medical bay with calm urgency. The engineers headed for the engine room. Already pulling tools from their packs, the security team took positions at key junctions, their eyes alert for any threat. "Commander Vasquez," Cyrith said as she watched this display of efficiency. "I must ask, why did you come?" Vasquez raised an eyebrow at the question. "You sent a distress call." "Yes. But the Korath Expanse is outside your territory. We have no treaties with your people. You had no obligation to risk your ship and crew for strangers." The human was quiet for a moment, and something shifted in her expression. A softening that made her seem more approachable, despite her warrior's bearing. "Captain, do you know what humans did for most of our history? I confess I know very little about your species. We fought each other," Vasquez said simply. "For thousands of years we killed our own kind over land and resources and ideas. We became very good at violence. Better than most species in this galaxy would believe." She paused and looked around at the damaged corridor, at the wounded ship full of desperate refugees. But somewhere along the way we also learned something else. We learned that the same strength that lets us destroy can also be used to protect. We learned that when someone is suffering, you help them, not because they can pay you back, not because it benefits you, but because it is the right thing to do. Cyrith felt her scales flush with emotion at these words. That is a beautiful philosophy. It is an expensive one, Vasquez admitted. But it is who we are. Now come, let us see what we can do about saving your people. As they walked through the ship toward the cargo bay, Cyrith noticed that Vasquez's eyes had grown hard again. The warrior returning to replace the philosopher. "Captain," the human said quietly, "the Kreth who attacked you, are they still in the area?" "We do not know. They left after stripping our cargo holds. We assumed they had moved on to find other victims." Vasquez nodded slowly, and there was something dangerous in her expression that made Cyrith's instincts scream warning. "Then perhaps," the human said, "after we have seen to your wounded, we should find out where they went." The crew of the Gentle Dawn gathered on the bridge to watch the battle unfold there. Sensors were damaged, but still functional enough to show what was happening in the asteroid field. 2 hours away, old Melox had managed to enhance their long range displays with some modifications borrowed from the human engineers who had stayed behind to protect them. What they witnessed that day would change everything they believed about the galaxy. The Defiance approached the Kreth position without any attempt at stealth. Commander Vasquez broadcast on an open channel that every ship in the region could hear. "Attention, Kreth raiding fleet. This is the Terran warship Defiance. You attacked a vessel carrying refugees and medical personnel. You left them to die in the void. You have committed crimes against innocent beings who pose no threat to you." The transmission continued, cold and implacable. "You will power down your weapons and surrender your vessels for inspection." Any captives aboard your ships will be released immediately. Your crews will be transported to the nearest Accord station to face justice for your crimes." There was a pause that seemed to stretch forever. "If you refuse, if you resist, if you attempt to flee, you will face the consequences. This is your only warning." Captain Cirith watched the tactical display as the 6 Kreth vessels responded to the transmission. They were forming into an attack formation, their weapons charging to full power. "They're not going to surrender," Keleth said quietly. "No," Cirith agreed. "The Kreth do not believe in surrender. They think strength comes only from victory." On the display, she could see the Kreth fleet beginning to move 6 ships against 1. The math was simple and brutal, even. The most powerful warship in the galaxy should not be able to defeat those odds. Then the Defiance began to move. The human ship accelerated directly toward the enemy formation without any attempt to maneuver or evade. Its engines burned with incredible intensity as it closed the distance faster than any vessel Cirith had ever seen. The Kreth opened fire brilliant. Lances of energy streaked across the void toward the human warship. Any normal ship would have been forced to dodge or raise shields or do something defensive. The Defiance did neither. It simply continued its charge directly into the incoming fire, and then something impossible happened. The weapons struck the human ship's hull and dissipated against some kind of barrier that Cirith could not identify. The energy simply vanished, absorbed or deflected by technology that no one in the Galactic Accord had ever developed. "What is that?" Dr. Rena whispered. "I do not know," Malox replied, his voice thick with awe. "Their shield technology is beyond anything in our databases." The Defiance closed the weapons range and opened fire. The human weapons were unlike anything Cirith had ever seen. They were not energy beams or plasma bolts or missiles. They were something else entirely. Concentrated bursts of destructive force that tore through Kreth shields as if they did not exist. The first Kreth ship exploded in a ball of fire before it could even complete its evasive maneuver. The second ship tried to flee and lasted exactly 4 seconds longer. The third ship managed to launch a full missile salvo before the human weapons found it. Every missile detonated harmlessly against that impossible barrier. Then the third ship was gone too. 3 ships in under a minute, Keleth said, and his voice was barely a whisper. They destroyed 3 ships in under a minute. The remaining 3 Kreth vessels broke formation and scattered in different directions. It was the smart tactical decision. By splitting up, they forced the human ship to choose which target to pursue. They could not all escape, but at least some of them might survive. Commander Vasquez's voice came across the open channel again. Calm and cold as ice, launched the Furies on the tactical display. Small contacts separated from the Defiance's hull. They were fighter craft, sleek and deadly, and piloted by individual humans who flew with a recklessness that bordered on insanity. The Fury screamed through the asteroid field after the fleeing slavers. They moved through the tumbling rocks with impossible precision, weaving between obstacles that should have destroyed them, gaining on their targets with every passing second. Kreth tried everything to shake their pursuers. They dove into dense asteroid clusters, hoping the debris would cover their escape. They launched countermeasures and decoys and jamming signals. They fired wildly behind them at enemies they could barely track. Nothing worked. Human pilots were relentless and unstoppable. One by one, the remaining Kreth ships were caught one by one. They were destroyed with clinical precision. The entire battle lasted 47 minutes from the first shot to the last 6 Kreth vessels against 1 human warship and a handful of fighter craft. The outcome was never in doubt on the bridge of the Gentle Dawn. No one spoke. They simply stared at the tactical display where the last Kreth ship was slowly dying. It had been disabled rather than destroyed, its weapons and engines crippled by precise strikes that left the crew alive but helpless. The Defiance moved alongside the crippled vessel, and Vasquez's voice came across the channel one final time. "Creth vessel. You will prepare for boarding. Your crew will be secured and transported to Accord authorities. Your cargo holds will be searched. If we find captives and they have been harmed..." She did not finish the threat. She did not need to 2 hours later. The Defiance returned to the Gentle Dawn Commander Vasquez's shuttle, docked, and she came aboard with a different expression than before. The cold warrior was gone, replaced by something tired but satisfied. "It is done," she told Captain Cirith. "The slaver fleet has been eliminated. One ship surrendered after we disabled it. The rest chose to fight." "Were there captives?" Cirith asked. 43, Vasquez said. "Mostly refugees like your people, taken from various ships over the past several weeks. They are aboard the Defiance, now receiving medical attention." Cirith felt tears prick at her eyes. "You saved them." "All of them. That was the mission," Vasquez said simply. "We do not leave people behind. We do not abandon the innocent to suffer. That is not who we are. Commander, I have served in space for most of my life. I have seen warships from a dozen species. I have studied tactics and strategy and military history. What your ship did today should not have been possible." Vasquez smiled, and some of the warmth returned to her scarred face. Humans have a saying: "Captain, impossible is just another word for something that has not been done yet. Your technology, your weapons, your shields, none of it matches anything in the Accord databases. We thought humans were a minor species with primitive capabilities. We let people think that." Vasquez admitted, "It is easier when others underestimate you. They leave you alone and do not interfere with your affairs. But you are not primitive at all. Are you? We are what we needed to become to survive. Our history forced us to be strong or perish. Now we use that strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves." She looked around the damaged bridge of the Gentle Dawn. "Your ship will need significant repairs before it can travel safely. The Defiance will escort you to the nearest Valorian port. It will take approximately 3 days at speeds your vessel can handle." "Commander," Cirith said, "I do not know how to thank you. You saved my crew, my passengers, and now you have saved dozens more innocents that we never even knew about." Vasquez reached out and clasped her shoulder with one warm hand. "Tell others what happened here. That is all the thanks I need. Let them know that when someone is suffering in the dark, help will come. Let them know that the silence will not last forever." She turned and headed back toward the airlock. "Now get some rest. Captain, you have earned it. And I have a ship full of rescued slaves who need to be delivered to people who can care for them properly." As she watched the human commander depart, Cirith realized that everything she thought she knew about the galaxy had just changed forever. The humans worked with a speed and efficiency that left the Valorian crew speechless within the first hour. Dr. Chun and his medical team had stabilized all 12 critical patients using equipment and techniques that the Arena had never seen before. A human doctor moved from patient to patient with calm precision, adapting his treatments to Valorian biology as if he had been studying their species his entire life. When Rena asked him how he knew so much about their anatomy, Chun simply shrugged. "We studied every species file in the Accord database on the way here," he said. 14 days is a long time, plenty of opportunity to learn. In the engine room, Lieutenant Torres and her team performed miracles that old Melox could barely comprehend. They crawled through damaged systems with tools that seemed impossibly advanced. Jury-rigging repairs that the Valorian engineer had calculated were beyond hope. Power was restored to critical systems within 2 hours. Life support stabilized within 3. The 4th hour. The Gentle Dawn was no longer a dying ship, but a wounded vessel on the path to Recovery. Melox stood beside Torres as she finished welding a replacement conduit into place. "This should not be possible," he said, gesturing at the repair. That junction was completely destroyed. I had written it off as unsalvageable. Torres pulled off her welding mask and grinned at him. Nothing is unsalvageable if you are stubborn enough to keep trying, she said. Human engineering philosophy: if it is broken, fix it. If you cannot fix it, find another way. If there is no other way, invent one. Your species has a remarkable attitude toward obstacles. We have had a lot of practice, Torres replied. Humans spent most of our history living on a single planet with limited resources. We learned early that giving up was not an option. That stubbornness carried us to the stars, while the medical and engineering teams worked. Captain Sirith noticed another group of humans moving through her ship. Sergeant Morrison and his security squad were not just standing guard. They were examining everything with careful attention, scanning the damage patterns on the walls, studying the sensor logs, collecting data with small devices that fit in the palms of their hands. Sirith found Commander Vasquez overseeing their work on the bridge. What are they looking for? She asked. Vasquez glanced up from a display showing the local star. Charts, evidence, she said simply. Your attackers left traces behind. Energy signatures, weapon residue, trajectory data. My people are gathering everything we need to track them. Track them, Sirith repeated. Commander, the Kreth raiding fleet consisted of 6 vessels. Your ship is impressive, but surely you do not intend to pursue them alone. Vasquez smiled, and it was not a reassuring expression. Captain, let me tell you something about humans. When someone hurts people under our protection, we do not let it go. We do not forget. We do not forgive. We find them, and we make sure they never hurt anyone again. But they are not under your protection. We are not your people. We are strangers from a species you have barely interacted with. You are people who needed help, Vasquez said. That is enough. She turned back to the display and tapped several controls. Besides, the Kreth are slavers. They did not just take your cargo. They took people. There are almost certainly captives aboard their ships right now. People who are waiting for someone to save them. The thought sent a chill through Sirith's scales. How can you know that? Because slavers do not attack medical transports for supplies. They attack them for prisoners, vulnerable people who will not be missed. Refugees without governments to protect them. The perfect targets. Morrison approached with a datapad in his hand. Commander, we have finished our analysis. The Kreth use standard raider tactics. Hit and run with overwhelming force. They left in a hurry after the attack. Probably worried about drawing attention. Do you have their heading? Yes, ma'am. They went to grid 17 by 23. There's an asteroid field there that shows up in Accord records as a known pirate haven. Vasquez nodded slowly, and her eyes grew cold. How many ships? 6 confirmed. Probably waiting for more victims before they head back to Kreth space with their cargo. Cargo meaning slaves. Yes, ma'am. Sirith watched this exchange with growing alarm. Commander Vasquez, what are you planning to do? The human turned to face her, and there was something ancient and terrible in her expression. The look of a predator preparing to hunt. I am going to give them a choice, Vasquez said. They can surrender and face justice for their crimes. Or they can resist and face us, 1 ship against 6. Those odds are not favorable. Captain Sirith, I appreciate your concern. But you do not understand what the Defiance is capable of. This ship was built for situations exactly like this one. She gestured at the viewport where the massive human warship hung in the darkness. Do you know why we named her Defiance? It is because she represents everything humans believe in. We defy those who prey on the weak. We defy those who think violence makes them strong. We defy the very idea that anyone should be allowed to enslave another being. Sirith felt her hearts beating faster. You would risk your entire crew for people you have never met. We would risk everything for that principle, Vasquez said. Because if we do not, then what is the point of having the power to help? She turned to Morrison. Sergeant, Return to the Defiance and inform the crew that we are going hunting. I want battle stations in 30 minutes. Yes, ma'am, as Morrison departed. Cirith reached out and touched Vasquez's arm. Commander, please, I need to understand. My people believe in helping others, but this goes beyond anything I have ever witnessed. You crossed impossible distances to save strangers, and now you're going to fight impossible odds to save more strangers. Why, Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. When I was young, she finally said, my family lived in a region of Earth that was torn apart by war. Raiders came to our village and took everything, killed my father. Would have killed us all if not for a group of soldiers, who arrived just in time. She met Cirith's eyes, and there was old pain there, mixed with fierce determination. Those soldiers were not from our country. They had no obligation to help us. They were peacekeepers from the other side of the world, who had come because someone needed to do something. They saved my life and the lives of everyone I loved. And now you do the same for others. Now I make sure that no one else has to feel what I felt. Waiting in the dark for help that might never come. And when help does come, I make sure it comes with enough force to end the threat forever. She straightened her uniform and her expression hardened back into that of a warrior. Your ship will remain here under the protection of a small security team. You are in no condition to join this fight, and I will not put wounded civilians at risk when we return. We will escort you to the nearest safe port. And if you do not return, Vasquez smiled grimly, then you will have a very interesting story to tell. But do not worry, Captain. We will return. Humans always keep our promises. She headed for the airlock and paused at the threshold. Rest now. Take care of your people. And trust that justice is coming for those who wronged you. Then she was gone, and Captain Cirith was left standing on her bridge, watching through the viewport as the massive human warship began to move. The Defiance turned away from the gentle dawn, and its engines flared with power that lit up the darkness like a second sun. Then it accelerated toward the asteroid field where the Kreth waited, and somewhere in the void, 6 slavers had no idea that death was coming for them. 3 weeks after the battle in the asteroid field, the gentle dawn finally reached Valorian space. The journey had been slow and careful, with the Defiance maintaining a protective position alongside them the entire way. Every ship they passed slowed to stare at the massive human warship with its scarred hull and bristling weapons. Word had already begun to spread through the shipping lanes about what had happened in the Korath expanse. By the time they reached the border, a small fleet of Valorian patrol vessels had assembled to meet them. Captain Cirith stood on her repaired bridge and watched as official communications flowed between the ships. The Valorian authorities were struggling to process what they were being told. A human warship had crossed impossible distances to answer a distress call. It had destroyed a Kreth raiding fleet that had terrorized the region for years. It had rescued dozens of captives and delivered them safely home, and it had asked for nothing in return. Commander Vasquez joined Cirith on the bridge for one final conversation before their paths diverged. The Accord will want to speak with your government, Cirith said. After what happened, everything is going to change. The galaxy will want to know who you really are. Vasquez leaned against a console and crossed her arms. They can ask whatever questions they like. We have nothing to hide. You have been hiding, though, have you not? You let everyone believe you were a minor species, when in truth you are something much more. We did not lie, Vasquez said. We simply did not correct their assumptions. Humans learned long ago that power attracts attention, and attention attracts enemies. We preferred to develop in peace without interference from those who might see you as a threat. And now the secret is out. At least partially. What happens next will depend on how the galaxy responds to learning the truth. Sirith considered this for a moment. What do you want? Commander, what does humanity want from the rest of us? Vasquez was quiet for a long time before answering. We want what we have always wanted. Captain, a universe where people do not have to die alone in the dark, wondering if anyone heard them calling. We want a galaxy where the strong protect the weak instead of preying on them. We want peace and justice, and a chance for every species to thrive. She straightened and met Sirith's eyes with fierce intensity. But we have also learned that some beings will never stop hurting others unless someone stops them. So we built ships like the Defiance. We trained warriors who could stand against the darkness. And we waited for the moment when we would be needed. You were waiting for someone like us to call for help. We were waiting for any excuse to start making a difference. Your distress call was the opportunity we had been hoping for. The border checkpoint loomed ahead, and Sirith knew their time together was almost over. What will you do now? She asked. Return to the Terran frontier and report what happened here. Then wait for new orders. There are other places where people need help. Other slavers and pirates and tyrants who need to be reminded that their actions have consequences. You will keep hunting them. We will keep protecting those who cannot protect themselves. That is our purpose now. That is who humans choose to be. The Valorian patrol vessels were signaling for the convoy to proceed to the orbital station. Sirith extended her hand in the human gesture she had learned. Vasquez clasped it warmly. Thank you, Sirith said. For everything, for coming when no one else would, for fighting when you had no obligation, for showing us what courage truly looks like. Thank you for surviving long enough for us to reach you, Vasquez replied. Without your strength, your patience, your refusal to give up hope, this story would have had a very different ending. She released Sirith's hand and stepped back. Take care of yourself, Captain, and if you ever need us again, call the humans. Sirith finished. Vasquez smiled. The first genuine warm expression Sirith had seen from her. Call the humans. We will always answer. The Defiance pulled away from the gentle dawn and turned toward the open void. Its impossible engines flared to life. Burning brighter than any star, within moments it had accelerated beyond the range of Valorian sensors and vanished into the deep black. But the silence it left behind was different now. In the weeks that followed, the story spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Merchants carried it from port to port, each telling adding new details and new wonder to Valorian. Government released official reports confirming what had happened. The 43 rescued captives shared their testimonies with anyone who would listen, and the Galactic Accord, which had dismissed humans as primitive and unremarkable, suddenly found itself facing very uncomfortable questions. Who were these humans really? Where had their technology come from? How many ships like the Defiance did they possess? And most importantly, what would happen if humanity decided to stop hiding in the shadows? The answers to those questions would take years to fully emerge, but some things became clear immediately in the Korth expanse. The slavers began to withdraw. Word had spread that a human warship patrolled these regions now, and no raider wanted to face the same fate as the Kreth fleet. Shipping lanes that had been dangerous for decades suddenly became safe refugee convoys that had once required military escorts now traveled unmolested. The mere threat of human intervention was enough to change behavior across an entire sector and in the halls of power throughout the galaxy. Diplomats and strategists and military commanders began to speak the word Terran with new respect. Some spoke it with fear, others spoke it with hope, but all of them understood that the balance of power had shifted in ways that no one had anticipated. Captain Sirith returned to her normal duties after the gentle dawn was fully repaired. She continued to transport medical supplies and refugees and wounded soldiers to wherever they were needed, but she carried something with her now, a story and a message and a promise. Whenever she met other captains Whenever she spoke to frightened refugees, whenever she encountered someone who had lost hope, she told them what she had learned. There is help out there, she would say. There are people who will come for you, even when everyone else has abandoned you. There are warriors who will fight for strangers simply because it is the right thing to do. Who, they would ask. The humans. She would reply, call the humans. They will always answer. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, aboard warships that no one had known existed, humanity listened. They listened to every distress call, every cry for help, every desperate prayer sent into the void by those who had been forgotten. They could not answer all of them, but they answered as many as they could, and with each rescue, each battle, each act of defiance against cruelty and injustice, the legend grew. The humans were coming. They had heard the silence, and they had chosen to break it. They had seen the darkness, and they had chosen to bring light. And for all those who had ever felt alone in the cold emptiness of space, that knowledge was enough. Help was out there. Someone was listening, and the silence would never be quite so terrible again.